So here we are on set at the Way Forward. So people watching this video will be like, wait, I thought this was the Stylist podcast, but we're on your set, which is super awesome and a very expansive experience for me because you've actually created a dedicated studio space, which is so fun. And I'm looking forward to doing that myself. As you know, mine is like in our living room at the moment.
That's how mine was though. Yeah, so I've been there too,
Yeah, it's kind of unprofessional. Yeah. I mean, I don't think people mind. They come to my house, but I could tell.
You have a beautiful home, though, so it's not horrible.
It's a vibe, but people walk in and they're like, "Oh, we're in here." I'm like, "Yeah, it's the living room. It's just called the Living Room Podcast."
Yeah, I got to give a shout out to Josh Trent on this one for this idea because after we did the Quadcast, he originally at that time had a studio in an apartment. And that's what gave me the inspiration for this. I'm like, that's the way to do it.
It's funny, dude, because when I walked in, I had deja vu. It's like almost the same kind of building. Yeah. It's very similar to his setup. But it's amazing also what you can fit in a small living room like this. Like, it's crazy with our friend Matt from Sound Shed Studios. The way, for those that can't see, he's so good. I mean, he did Joe Rogan's studio. I mean, he's like the studio guy, but he suspends everything from the ceiling. So even in a small space, there's nothing on the floor.
No, there's nothing.
Like cables and tripods. He's such a badass. I'm so excited to have met him.
It's pretty wild with the camera effects too. Like, this is a relatively small space, but on the center angle specifically, it makes it look like it's huge.
Hollywood magic, baby.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. So let's start out with what's the latest in the way forward. You know, I've always been impressed by your community building, kind of brand building capacity as someone from the sidelines who I guess what I do would be called a personal brand. Everything I've done is kind of it's a Luke Storey thing. And I've always kind of wondered, I don't know when or what it would look like if I created kind of another entity of sorts to do something more comprehensive, and that's kind of what you've been building and are continuing to build. What's like the latest? I know you guys went through a whole website remodel, and you were doing some stuff in the law space, and community building and all this stuff. So give people that aren't familiar with you like an overview of what you do and what you're going to do. Yeah,
so I'll save the sort of mission statements and things like that, which are great. Don't get me wrong. I spent a lot of time intentionally on them, but I want to speak from the heart here on like what the way forward is. So I'll save that and you can check that out in the show notes, I'd imagine. But the way forward, I'm so glad that you said what you said on the podcast that I just interviewed you on. I've been playing with this term like to really describe the essence of what the way forward is as I see it. And it is remembering who we are. Like that is literally the term that I have used. And you said that I just interviewed Luke in my studio for those who don't know.
We're going on that was like over 3 hours. So now we got another 90 minutes to go. And it's funny, when I walked in, you're like, are you sure you want to do both? I'm like, yeah, let's go. And then after we did the one, I was like, I don't know. Do I have brain capacity left? Yes, I can do it.
We can do it. But it's helping people remember who they are. And it's hard to contextualize what it is exactly that we explore with the way forward. But it's a variety of topics related to health, law, natural living, getting back to the earth, how to commune with each other, possibly looking at ancient history and hidden history to figure out where we're coming from and where we're going. It's sort of an amalgamation of all those things. And the way to describe it is remembering who we are and what we're doing with respect to community building around that, like a community of people remembering who and what we are. I know that I talk to people on a regular basis who are like, I am aware of X, Y, and Z. I love your show, or I listen to this person, I listen to that person. I'm aware of the various agendas. I'm on the, path to discover how the Biofield works with fourth phase water and things like this. I'm so interested in that, but I'm struggling to find community around me. And I have so many people reach out with that problem, and I know you probably do too. And what we're doing with the way forward is you'll be able to find like-minded practitioners near you, like-minded alternative schools near you, farms near you that you can buy directly from, and then people near you. And that will continue to evolve where if you're a member of the way forward, you can be sure that you'll be able to type in your zip or postal code or just set a geolocation and a radius on our web-based platform that functions like an app and it'll populate all of those things near you. Because the point is, like, yes, it's incredible that we get to connect virtually with like-minded people and have these people we can rely on and relate to, and it's incredibly validating. But it's also incredibly important, especially in this day and age with the emergence of sort of a technocratic system, as I see it and a lot of other people see it who don't fall into the left-right delusion. We can talk about that a little bit. It's going to be incredibly important moving forward, and it almost goes without saying, to connect with in-person community. So what we're doing is we're using virtual tools, virtual means, to help people connect in person. So that's what we're working on right now with the way forward. And actually, I think by the time this episode comes out, because we're in the final phases of beta testing, that platform will have launched on our website. And we're so stoked for it because it's so incredibly important that we have our in-person community together so that we can remember who and what we are together. And something that has always stuck with me with respect to a good friend of mine, Eileen McCusick, and her work as it relates to the Biofield, and it actually relates to David Hawkins' scale of consciousness as well. Strong coherent field overtakes and trains weaker incoherent fields, basically bring them into coherence. And the more that you get strong coherent fields in and of themselves as individual people, you could say, people who are very coherent and clear, people who are on the path of remembering who and what we are, and get them together with other people who are doing the same thing, the concentric rings and the ripple effects that creates is something that I think we can't even really grasp. Like the energetics, the metaphysics of that is something that is so incredibly potent. And I know this is long-winded, but to relate it back to Veda Austin's work as an example, Veda did this experiment where, and for those who are unfamiliar with her work, basically what Veda does is builds upon the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto and is showing that water, when exposed to any environment, physically or metaphysically, but in this case, let's say metaphysically, a thought, a feeling, or a spoken word, a song, set water next to your bedside and set the intention for water to show you what it was just exposed to. Water will reflect back its own artistic interpretation of what it was just exposed to when it is frozen using this unique freezing method, which is showing that metaphysically and physically, water is tremendously impacted in terms of its physical orientation and expression by that which it was exposed to. And given that water permeates all facets of this reality, at the very least, biological beings like us, it shows the importance of aligning our thoughts, our feelings, our spoken words, our intentions, our prayers, and all of these things, and they actually have a measurable impact on reality. Now, Veda Austin's experiment with eggs. So Veda did this experiment where she took one free-range egg, which is coming from a chicken that was, raised as chickens were supposed to be raised mostly. In America, we'd call them pasture-raised because we have the distinction between free-range and pasture, but for the sake of the argument, it was a pasture-raised egg, let's say. And surrounded it with 12 caged eggs, right? 12 caged eggs surrounding one pasture-raised egg. As a control, she set a free-range egg to the side from the same batch and a caged egg to the side from that same batch of caged eggs. Cracked them open, froze the albumin using her unique freezing method. And in the free-range egg albumin, the crystallography of that egg had this beautiful feathery patterning. I could probably send it to you. You guys could pull it up on screen, but this beautiful crystallography, like this coherence that invokes a feeling of awe and wonder coming from an egg that was raised, or coming from a chicken that was raised as chickens are supposed to be raised. But the caged egg, which is coming from a chicken who was under fluorescent lights, eating an unnatural diet, in a perpetual state of fight or flight, pumped with hormones, antibiotics, shots, and things like this. Caged egg had no coherence in the crystallography when it was cracked open and the albumin was frozen. The albumin did not have any coherence to it. Sets those to the side as a control. This free-range egg surrounded by 12 caged eggs, right? One single free-range egg surrounded by 12 caged eggs. The next day, cracks them open and frees the albumin after just leaving them in this orientation overnight where they're all surrounding the one free-range egg. All of the caged eggs have now improved in their coherence visibly to the naked eye, meaning that they became more coherent. The albumin actually looks like that of a free-range egg just by being in proximity to the one free-range egg. And the one free-range egg itself was totally unimpacted, still had this beautiful feathery patterning, beautiful coherence. Assuming that that might represent what happens with us as human beings, and relating it back to David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, he talks about this a little bit too. I don't remember the exact numbers, but like one person who's operating at like an 800 counteracts that of like 1 point something million or something like this to the people who are operating at the lower levels.
That's what, like how he explained that the earth realm maintains its balance, even though there are fewer conscious people than there are unconscious.
Right.
There are far more people acting out of base instincts, evil, etc., than there are people who are living the good life of love and light.
Right.
It's like only takes a small handful of love and light oriented people to counterbalance a bunch of, parasitic evil people.
Yeah. So I think this experiment from Veda, if it applies to us, and I believe it largely does, given that we're likely comprised of fourth phase water, which is highly impressionable, as Dr. Gerald Pollack has showed through multiple experiments, and prior to him, Dr. Gilbert Ling. And we're like a liquid crystal matrix. And if what we're putting out from the waters of our body through our biofield, connecting with other people around us who are trying to come into this heart coherence, and we're doing that together in person and community, and we can use this tool, this web-based tool, to find our in-person community, because I live a little bit further north in Texas than just the Austin area, but the area that I live in is an area of 250,000 people. I guarantee there are like-minded people in my area. I like coming down to Austin because I like hanging out with you guys. But I guarantee there are like-minded people in my area. I've just yet to find them. But I guarantee they're there, and this will be the tool that allows people to find each other so that we can come into greater coherence, so that we can be around like-minded people, so we can create those concentric rings, so we can be the free-range egg, if you want to call it that. And that's what we're trying to do with the way forward, and it's all on the pursuit of remembering who and what we truly are as human beings.
So great, dude. I mean, that's the way forward. It's like when we look at the institutions in the world that are so antithetical to life and happiness and well-being, I think our natural instinct is to want to tear them down, right? But they're so deeply ingrained, and the kind of color of energy required to destroy something is the very energy that built the thing you want to destroy in the first place.
Yep.
Whereas the energy that you're talking about, to me, reads as, cool, you guys have your systems over there. Good luck with that. We're building our own parallel decentralized system, which is just beautiful. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to create the world that many of us want to see other than that, like constructive, collaborative, unified energy and power that's actually used to build something rather than to try to destroy something that resists its destruction at every turn.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, we had, like me and my team, I guess it is a we. It takes a village. Veda was on my podcast. I forget if it was 2023 or 24. Maybe it's 23, and it was the highest download of the year.
There's a reason
which
for that.
is, and it was, people always say, well, what was your favorite episode? It's difficult because some of them are really meaningful in the moment, like to me personally. Yeah. Some of them are kind of a milestone, Gabor Mate or Joe Dispenza or someone that I really respect. And it's just like, wow, I can't believe I just talked to that person. But oftentimes my favorite shows are people that are relatively unknown, and we just have like an epic, transformative experience together. And Veda was one of those. I mean, definitely in my top 10 of, 9 years and I don't know how many, almost 600 episodes or something. It was just like so freaking mind-blowing talking to her. So we'll link to that episode in the show notes. And I'm so fascinated by her work. And she's also just such a beautiful soul also. Yeah. It's not like a lot of people do cool work, but you really wouldn't want to hang out with them right. necessarily. She's someone who does really cool work and you totally want to hang out with her.
Hey y'all, I'm here with Melissa Kupsch from RMDY Academy of Homeopathy. We are so stoked here at the Way Forward to be partnering with Melissa and RMDY in order to spread the message of homeopathy across the world, and also to partner on the eventual development of healing centers across the United States.
People are pretty quickly coming to realize that frequency is the future of medicine. We are witnessing the great resurgence of homeopathy right now. We're really moving away from that suppressive medical model. Whether it's for eczema, asthma, hormones, fertility, anxiety, depression, trauma, whatever it is, it all starts as energy in the person's field first. If we change our field, we can completely change our life. Our 2-year academy is open worldwide to anyone who wants to become a homeopath. We've got 5 lecturers and we currently have over 500 students enrolled, which is record numbers in our field. A career in homeopathy is amazing for anyone who wants flexibility in their work and who wants to be valuable in creating this new world. We have stay-at-home parents enrolled, we have ex-medical professionals, grandparents signed up who want to learn how to heal their grandchildren and pass on that invaluable knowledge. We even have husband and wife teams. So my husband enrolled in the course with no prior knowledge of health as a background, and he is loving it.
Kylie is also enrolled as well, so my partner is, and she's so stoked to become a homeopath and to be helping to spread this message across the world.
The thing that we hear from so many of our students is, I found my thing. Homeopathy is the key. We harness frequencies from nature and we alter the field of all creations. So if anybody wants to join us or they want to know more about it, they can visit our website.
Yeah, and all that information will be in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about RMDY Academy, also RMDY Collective, also some of the homeopathic products that they have, please just head to the show notes. All of that will be listed there.
Of all the people I see online and know personally that have a perspective on world affairs, geopolitical issues, environmental issues, the medical system, apparatus, all these things, I think you're one of the most interesting and definitely like the most thought-provoking on Twitter, for example. There's like a few kind of, I don't know, libertarian / right-leaning pundits that I follow on there. And sometimes they have some really good things to say, but they're still very much like caught in this left-right paradigm, win-lose scenario, us versus them. And your perspective is one I like because you seem to be, I don't know, looking at things that are going on always with a sense of curiosity and not a blind trust or like some sort of allegiance to one side or the other. So some people would look at that as like a black pill thing where you're like, oh, they're all evil. There is, all left and right sucks, etc. But I don't think that's your perspective. I think where you come from is like, let's look at this thing from all angles and let's wait and see, right? So at the time of this recording, and oftentimes these are recorded way far in advance from when they're actually published, this one's going to come out very soon. So right now in like where we are in the world in terms of like the political spectrum is Donald Trump is president, and many people are very happy about that. I think a much smaller portion of people are absolutely, beside themselves because literally Hitler is now in charge. And so there's moves being made, right? He's like appointing different people. And what I see, if I step back, and I think you're kind of just much more intelligent and knowledgeable about this stuff in general. But,
I don't know about that, but okay.
Well, no, we'll find out. But I see like a lot of hopium being dealt out, right? Yesterday, I think I might have answered one of your tweets because we were talking about, you posted about the Epstein files. I'm just like, this is the fakest ass shit I've ever seen. And I said, this is the methadone of hopium, right? It's just like a cheap substitute to kind of pacify the masses. The shit they put out, the redacted fake ass binders, all those pages are already online like a couple years ago, the flight logs and stuff. It's like, we've already had that information. It doesn't mean anything. So I'm kind of the mind that, okay, you have let me see if I can actually like condense this down and articulate it. You have the black-pilled people that are like, Trump's owned by Israel. All this shit is totally fake.
We're all screwed.
Yeah, all they're doing is like they push this leftist shit so hard just to freak everyone out and galvanize them to get behind another false leader who's basically doing the same thing just in a different way, who's now going to swing the pendulum to right-wing authoritarianism through the technocratic state. And Elon is like in on this whole thing, and all they're doing is just going for our rights and liberties in a more subversive way because of the reaction that they caused by having like a left-wing, establishment that went so nuts, right? And so it's just all a total game, and these guys all know what they're doing. They're all Jesuits and Jews and whatever, right? I'm of the mind that like none of these people even control anything anyway, that there's people whose names we will never even know in our lifetime that are behind every decision that's ever made at these levels, and that who everyone's freaked out about or happy about being the president is literally the CEO of the United States corporation located in the District of Columbia, who is not running anything at all. And just like there's an owner of a corporation or a board of directors or a group of people that have equity in a corporation, then there's the CEO, the COO, the CFO, et cetera. The CEO has some power and decision-making authority, but the people that own the company, the board of directors, are informing what that CEO does.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what we're looking at. But I also don't think that like Donald Trump is malicious and wants to destroy America. I just think that there's powers that he's beholden to, and he probably thinks he's doing the right thing. And the same could be said for Elon Musk, because if you look at like on its face, a lot of this transparency and Doge and all this stuff, it's like, wow, that's actually kind of positive. Like, let's cut the corruption and the waste. I mean, this country's just been gutted for, I don't know, a couple hundred years probably, right? By corrupt and inept people. Yet you have this guy Elon who bold-faced lies that we're going to space and like we're going to Mars and that these rockets are going somewhere and that a Tesla. Remember, this is what people forget. Remember when he pretended like there was a Tesla car with an astronaut in it orbiting the Earth? I mean, this guy is a liar.
Right.
So it's like, okay, he's not trustworthy. This guy is totally lacking integrity. He's absolutely like a liar, but is still seemingly doing some cool stuff, So I don't know that there's any way to like make any sense of any of that. The only piece I can find is having the awareness that in my day-to-day personal life, anything and everything the government's ever done has actually had zero impact. Even in COVID.
Yeah.
Objectively, the only thing about my life that changed was that on a few occasions when I went into a public space, some Karen would get in my face and tell me to put a mask on. And when I go on airplanes. That was the only thing in the physical world that was verifiably different. Apart from that, regardless if it was Pedo Joe or Orange Man, supposedly in charge, whomever, my actual life has never been impacted. And that's what I constantly remind myself when I get caught up in like, ooh, these guys are going to save us or these guys are going to kill us. It's like so illusory, the whole thing. And we have so little fucking clue about what is going on. We're all being manipulated into tribalism to destabilize what the kind of thing you're building with the way forward. Like the entire thing is engineered to keep us
totally
warring against each other when what is actually against humanity as a whole is completely invisible.
Yeah.
And we only see periodic manifestations of its power and intentions when they become so obvious. So that's totally not a question. It's a long-winded diatribe on kind of where I'm seeing things right now. Where I struggle is like staying in that place of knowing that it doesn't matter, because it's so tempting to get sucked into, oh man, I want to see the Epstein list, I want to see him prosecuted. Then I'm disappointed when they put out some fake ass binders, right? It's like, dude, we're in the middle of a pharmacide right now. Like our skies are being completely sprayed with poison since I started seeing it in maybe 2000, you know, and when I was living in LA. And then you have like this Maha group that's coming around talking about Fruit Loops. And I'm just like, dude, you're still giving babies 87 vaccines, many of them with this bioweapon. Like, what? Food dye?
Right.
This is the fakest ass shit I've ever seen in my life. It's maddening. So I try to not be involved in it, but there's like, I think the innate human instinct, we want to know what's going on in our tribe. Like we have a drive to understand current events and be aware of what's happening. There's like a town crier, right? Going hunter-gatherer. You got the guy that goes to the next neighboring villages and comes back and tells you what's going on, who's killing the deer on that mountain and who's sleeping with who and who had a kid and who died and who's in what tribe. Like we want to know this, but I find when I pay attention to it, it gives me anxiety on a very sub-perceptual level. Meanwhile, none of it fucking matters at all in my real life.
Amen.
So I don't know if there's a question in
dude,
there.
I have a lot to say on that.
So unpack, you know, Maha, is Trump the savior?
Yeah.
You know, is he the devil? Does he know what he's doing? Does he have ill will? Is he totally controlled? You know, because, and that's the last thing I'll say, objectively, geopolitically speaking, I would say things are looking like they're improving.
Totally.
Based on where we were a couple years ago, where you just had like a complete puppet set on blatant destruction of the entire country, if not the world, right? So now, like, you at least have someone feigning, trying to make some small improvements, even though they're not the improvements that I really want, like totally annihilating this I can't even say it. mRNA shit, chemtrails, like all these towers everywhere. The things that actually matter to me are being totally ignored. So I don't know. It's all very confusing.
Yeah, so I'll comment on it as best I can. And first I'll say that a lot of what I'm going to say is inherently speculation. Like I won't ever pretend to know exactly what is going on at any level of government or anything like this. And ultimately what I'll end with, I'll come back to, is the illusion of authority itself, which I think recontextualize how you can take the position that irrespective of who's in charge, they are all at some level trying to deceive you and don't have your best interest in mind without falling into a black-pilled position that many people do fall into, which I like to think is that plus, oh, we're all screwed anyway. I don't think that at all. Not even a little bit. I don't even think a little bit that we're all screwed anyway. So I'll come back to that. As far as Trump goes, if you simply look at his track record from 2016 through 2020, it flies in the face of this idea that he's fighting for freedom. And that's all I can go off of with respect to my perceptions for him. Like I could comment over and over again. I could find so many different ways that what he did, signing the CARES Act, which initiated the largest transfer of wealth from the 1% or from the people to the 1% that the world may have ever seen in recorded history that we know of at the least. One example. Operation Warp Speed, another example. Giving Fauci a President Accommodation Medal before Trump left office, another example. Scott Gottlieb was who Trump nominated as commissioner of the FDA. Scott Gottlieb served as commissioner of the FDA from 2017 through 2019. While commissioner of the FDA, one of the things that he did is help expedite the approval process of experimental drugs and therapeutics. Scott Gottlieb leaves the FDA, joins Pfizer, where, through Trump's Operation Warp Speed, an experimental drug is expedited in its approval process. So, again, I could go on and on and on about things like this. His opinion on, red flag laws, so many things. So that's what I have to go off of. So when I also take into consideration that the Overton window, which is the acceptable discourse amongst society, and no one sets what the Overton window is, but it's just generally this window of acceptable discourse amongst society, of which I think is largely artificially constructed, and over the past, I don't know how long, has been shifting further and further towards the left, to where now middle of the road positions tend years ago now seem pretty crazy, which is where you end up with Jordan Peterson, who says what I consider to be very obvious things that aren't that profound, in my opinion, are like, oh my God, do you hear what he's saying? There's only two genders. I'm like, yeah, like this was obvious 15 years ago, but because the Overton window has shifted so far that way, and this is accompanied with so much tyranny and ineptitude coming from that, quote, side of the political spectrum, it makes it so anything that is just better than that appears incredibly freedom-oriented. Then the other thing that the parasitic class, if you want to call them that, is so good at doing.
I prefer that over elites. I can't stand when they call them elites because they're actually subhuman.
Right. They're not elite. At least like the way that they're behaving, like ultimately the highest level they're playing a role. But
parasites is, I think, actually very accurate.
Right. Well, because the way that I look at it is that they require, in order to carry out their agenda, the manipulation of our own thought energy to help bring into reality or perpetuate in reality the spark that they initially lit, you could say. Like one example of that, and again, I'll get to this later, is the illusion of authority itself. Like the belief that is held, irrespective of whether you oppose authority or whether you're pro-authority, the collective belief is a recognition that men and women who call themselves, quote, government, are authority, which perpetuates their ability to do whatever it is that they do. It's that foundational belief that is required in order for them to do what they do. So anyway, back to the Overton window thing. Accompanied with the Overton window continually shifting to the left so that now anything that appears better than this crazy leftist position is now, oh, this is freedom-oriented. When you compare what Trump is saying both 2016 through 2020 and a little bit before that, and also during this last campaign and now his presidency, to what Ron Paul was saying 15 years ago, it makes what Trump's saying look like chump change, like almost even tyrannical in many ways relative to what Ron Paul was openly saying during his presidential campaign 15 years ago. And that's how much it has shifted towards this leftist tyrannical position.
Yeah, like we went from end the Fed, like totally abolish the Federal Reserve, which is kind of one of the main heads of the snake, to no tax on tips, right? So no tax on tips sounds like, whoa, this is like, 1776, baby.
Right.
Meanwhile, like, hello.
Right. Exactly. That's a perfect example of that. And so the other thing that the parasitic class is really good at, aside from like getting us to use our own thought energy, our own co-creative capacity to help perpetuate more of what they want, and that applies to black pill people who constantly focus on what they're doing from a very fear-based lens. So that's one piece. The other thing they're doing is getting us to group ourselves around an ideology that has a lot of, I guess you could say, crossover in terms of shared belief, but ultimately that ideology is then grouped around an individual or a government organization or a government side. What I mean by that is, like, for the overwhelming majority of people who understand that Big Pharma doesn't have our best interest in mind, of which you and I share that same opinion. The overwhelming majority of people understanding that they're spraying our skies. Overwhelming majority of people who understand that, all these beliefs that we share have now rallied around a man, and that man, Trump, or in some cases now Elon Musk and these other actors, are the figurehead for that movement. Where I don't buy into that, but a lot of people do. So instead of rallying around the community that should be forming around this and pulling ourselves together in community and saying, okay, this system is inherently corrupt. What can we do collectively to dissolve our belief in that system and start creating things outside of it that make that system obsolete? It's now that these ideas and this ideology is wrapped into outsourcing to this one individual or small group of individuals, outsourcing power, outsourcing our own agency, outsourcing authority to them in the hopes that they will do it for us or they will change the system for us. And because that leftist position has become so incredibly corrupt, people are now right back into the illusion of authority because they do share some of these ideas. They're waking up to the problem with vaccines, and they think, oh, if you're recognizing the problem with vaccines, this false dilemma, I'm going to fall into this side now and outsource my power to this individual who is operating within the construct of government and, doing some superficial things that might appear to be better, of which we can still celebrate those wins when they do come, like him talking about ending the Department of Education. Amazing. I can objectively look at that in and of itself and say, that's great. While also being incredibly skeptical of the amount of people who are now blindly outsourcing all of their power, agency, and authority to this individual that is operating in government, when that same group of people, when the leftist position was in charge of that mechanism, understood the necessity to no longer be a part of that system and try to find solutions outside of it to dissolve the illusion of authority. Now, many of those same people are right back into that illusion of authority, right back into, government is going to do a lot of things to save us possibly. They're saying a lot of things that I like, but again, that's all relative to this leftist position over here. So that's my general thoughts on this. And to round it out, I can recognize that, again, celebrate the wins that this, Trump's team ushers in, like, again, trying to dissolve the Department of Education, even throwing us a bone and talking about possibly abolishing the IRS and things like this. That's great. While also being incredibly skeptical of what's to come and how many people are outsourcing power to them. And that doesn't mean that I think we're all screwed. That's a false dilemma. It's a false binary. I am fully confident in the power of us as individuals, and more importantly, when we gather together collectively to initiate change that makes that old system obsolete. But the point in that is it requires that people recognize that they are outsourcing their power to this system just in a different way, with a different flavor, with a different so-called team. I don't think any lasting change could come from that. Even if this administration does things that I overwhelmingly would celebrate, which they might do. I can't say that I know for sure. That is then subject to change 4 years later. Again, back the other way. So why is it that we should put all of our eggs, or the majority of our eggs, energetically, in terms of time, in terms of our awareness, in terms of our resources, in that basket, when it is also subject to change, again, 2 years later, 4 years later, by another administration coming in and taking back the ring of power? I don't think that's a worthwhile pursuit. And then the last thing I'll say, I know this is very long-winded.
It's about as long as my question, so
okay.
It's fair.
Most of us already know Shilajit is powerful. It's been used for thousands of years for energy, mental clarity, and overall vitality. But here's the problem. Most companies offering Shilajit are cutting corners. They're using fillers, skipping proper testing, and even hiding heavy metals like lead and arsenic behind fancy marketing and Instagram influencers. Dr. Andy Kaufman saw this happening and decided enough was enough. As an MIT biology graduate and tireless advocate for health freedom, he spent years researching and testing dozens of different Shilajit sources. And what he found was shocking: widespread contamination, fake lab reports, and murky supply chains everywhere he looked. And in response, he decided to create his own Shilajit, Authentica Shilajit, sourced from over 16,000 feet in the Himalayas, rigorously tested for purity, and backed by complete transparency. No fillers, no mystery ingredients, just the real deal. Shilajit you can actually trust and feel from the first serving. And listen, out of all the natural health doctors out there, Dr. Andy Kaufman is one of the most brilliant, in-depth researchers I know. If he recommends something, I'm definitely going to pay more attention. So if you're taking Shilajit already but have that gut feeling that something's just off, you're probably right. Trust that instinct and check out medauthentica.com/wayforward, or just head to the show notes and be sure to use code WAYFORWARD for 10% off your first order. Irrespective of what does happen there, and this is while acknowledging the illusion of authority, or even if you haven't even come to understand the illusion of authority, if you really examine your day-to-day life, for the overwhelming majority of people in the United States at the least, right? And you could even say largely in other Western countries for the most part. exactly what you said in your question/statement. My day-to-day life is not impacted by whatever the heck happens there. Like, great, they're talking about banning various food dyes and things like this. Okay, I don't need that because I know that with my family, my decisions, my familial decisions are made by us, and no man or woman in government is making those decisions for me anyway because I've already taken back control of my own life. I'm not outsourcing decision making to them. My responsibility for myself and my family is on us, because with great freedom comes great responsibility. And I've acknowledged that in my own life. It doesn't matter what they're doing. And even like when it comes to, okay, people will say, yeah, but Alec, they're spraying the sky. And don't get me wrong, they are. And that is objectively wrong. And I hope that, this administration, this is one thing that they could do to acknowledge that and get that to stop. That'd be great. But who knows if they will. And I'm not relying on that. But I firmly believe that this vessel was created in such a way that it is so incredibly powerful. It is the most brilliant technology in existence that myself, and if I gather with a bunch more people and we focus our thought awareness on dissolving that, or at least diminishing the effects of it, we actually can do that. And ultimately, this thing that I'm in, that I'm harboring, is so damn resilient, and I trust in God, creator, source, in my body's own wisdom, that I know that whatever the fuck they're spraying in the sky, my body can overcome that. And I think when you take this position, it makes all those conversations just totally nonsensical. And that doesn't mean that I don't draw awareness to them sometimes, but it's because I think that what I do with my audience is go through my own internal processes on what I think about something in order to reflect back to them, so that someone else who follows me might be able to be like, oh yeah, you know what? I was outsourcing a little bit, or I was buying into false hope instead of buying into the power of us as individuals and as community. And that's why I do comment on them sometimes. But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a great opener to this dialogue, because humans are, we have a negativity bias in the brain for survival, right? So we're always looking outside of ourselves for safety or the lack thereof. And if we haven't identified and integrated our own power, the next logical move is to look for something or someone to save us from what we perceive to be threatening. Yeah. And I see this in my own life, because I agree. I mean, I can choose the water that I drink. I can choose the food. I mean, I have a little bit of agency over EMF in my house, at least when I'm there. So even though there are, a few things kind of within some degree of control, as an example, the geoengineering, that's like the one thing that really bothers me, because I feel totally powerless to affect change. So I find myself, like, I'll be on Twitter, like tagging Donald Trump and Elon Musk and RFK. I'm like, you guys, fuck your Doge, like your Epstein files. I want to see the pilot files. Yeah. Okay, I mean, it's sad that all those kids got abused. I totally relate to that on a personal level and deeply. Yet, what's that going to actually change about our future if some of Epstein's clients, are actually held accountable, which I know they won't be anyway. They're
not going to do that anyway. Let me comment on that one more time real quick. Yeah. It's like, again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that either. Like, I hope that they take that on. But the more that I outsource power and agency to them, and I as one individual do it amongst a sea of other individuals who are looking to them to do it, instead of all of us making decisions collectively. Like when you bring up, it would be a little bit difficult and it would take some time when it comes to geoengineering, but we can affect change. We remember those pilots are human beings in and of themselves. I used to be an agent of the state. I went to West Point, the world's preeminent government indoctrination camp. I was fully indoctrinated to believe that that was the right thing to do, to be a part of this machine that is the Department of Defense, quote, fighting for freedom against enemies, foreign and domestic, right? And if I can wake up to the problems with that, so too can all these other people who are acting as agents of the state. And what it requires is that those of us who can see what's going on truly embody our own position and continue to educate people to, rather than vote for a new authority figure, vote with their dollar, vote with their decision making, because just like you said, you can control your EMF environment in your own home to a large degree. Yeah, you go to hotels and things like this, and they are riddled with non-native EMFs. But the more that those of us who are just average people take back our own power and make decisions ourselves, and then educate others openly, unashamedly, authentically, and stop trying to rely on government, who has time and time again given us false hope when a new person comes into power, the more that it will actually create change in the real world, to where hotels won't have freaking anyone come there because it's like, oh, the people are now aware of non-native EMFs and they don't want to come to our hotel unless we deal with this. I mean, you saw some companies do that over the last 5 years, where they are sort of forced to change because of not government doing anything, but societal trends of people now being hip to certain things. So it's like, oh shit, if we want to save our bottom line, we are going to have to adjust a little bit to this. And that's the real power that we have individually and collectively.
Totally, man. I mean, I think about that with, when I'm on Twitter trying to get one of my fantasy saviors to do something about geoengineering, for example. And then I was doing that yesterday, and then I got a text in our law dojo, and someone's like, hey, I'm doing the Cal Washington in power thing. We're going to start litigating against, 5G and chemtrails. And I was like, I'm too busy,
Right.
Which I am, I have my own way of kind of contributing to that solution, but that's a lot harder to open that text, join the group, go on some Zoom meetings, figure out who we need to litigate, who's going to spearhead it, how do we prepare the motions, how do we file, yada, yada. I mean, there's a lot to do and a lot to learn. It's a massive responsibility. And myself included, I'm like, too hard. I'm just going to tweet at, some person that I assume to have authority to protect me and save me from it, because I don't want to deal with it myself. I mean, that's just one little example of what you speak to here. It's just, we're ingrained, I think, from being in school. And like, you ask the teacher permission to go to the bathroom. It's like, what? My body wants to do something. I don't need to ask anyone. I go do it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, from day one, even our parents, giving birth to us in a hospital, it's like the man in the white coat is their authority, telling them how to handle us from the time we enter this world. And we observe that on some level, and we follow that. I think, like, when you turned me on to, what's it called? The greatest superstition? What's
the most dangerous superstition?
Most dangerous superstition. Dude, I've read a lot of books that have been meaningful to me, and I would say changed my life. That one by Larkin Rose, and we'll put it in the show notes. I mean, that just nuked my entire worldview in terms of the external world, because he so clearly makes the case that, like, our single issue as a species is this delusion, this hallucination that any man or woman has any authority to tell us what to do. I mean, it's like so simple, you can't even get the gravity of it, right? It's like, that is the root cause of the entire fucking problem, is that we somehow buy into that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if I think about it in my own life, let's say I'm a control freak because I feel inherently disempowered and weak. And so I feel like telling you and her, like, what to do when this podcast ends, like, hey, go pick up that thing. Hey, put these other pants on. Like, what? You guys would be like, get the fuck out of here.
Right.
Who are you to tell me what to do? But if I come in here in some kind of uniform and start telling you what to do, oh yeah, no, yes sir, Luke, why? Right. What is that? That's insane.
Right. No,
and what type of person? And I mean, it's like, I'm sure there's some well-intent. I mean, I've met RFK, for example, on a number of occasions. I really believe that guy has high integrity, and that he's a kind person, and that he really cares about people. So I think there are rare exceptions, but by and large, what kind of person spends their life energy to put themselves in a position to be able to control other people?
Right.
Like, that's a weird motive. I don't want to control anyone. You
Like,
know what I mean?
let's say you even had good intentions behind it too. Can you imagine thinking that your perspective and your outlook on life is so incredibly good and it's the best perspective that you need to wield it against other people using the mechanisms of government?
Yeah, because the mechanisms of government are coercion, violence, and death,
Right.
or imprisonment.
Right, exactly.
I mean, that's if you don't follow the dictates of these assumed phony authorities, that's how they enforce,
Yeah.
right? It's like it's enforced through threat, coercion, violence. Like,
Right.
that's the only reason any of us listen to any of them.
And I would say the other one too, this is the unspoken one, this relates back to geoengineering as well, is tacit agreement too. Is like this perspective that because we don't set a hard, firm boundary and say no individually and collectively, they'll just do it.
Right.
Which is why, like,
It's like an unrebutted contract,
Yeah.
an offer to contract
Yeah.
is agreement, tacit
Yeah.
agreement. Right?
tacit agreement,
And our
exactly.
I mean, this is stuff I've been learning through studying law, and you've turned me on to so many great resources. But it's like basically from the first time we sign our name on a document when we're 16 and we get a job at Pizza Hut or whatever, we've unknowingly contracted in to all of these agreements that don't serve our interest
Yeah,
because we believe in the authority that asked us to sign them.
exactly.
Now, you
exactly.
need to read that thing, your W-9, whatever. Yeah, and this is what everyone does. This is what we do. You got to be a good citizen. You know, this is how you're a good person. You're responsible. You're an adult now. It's part of the thing. Driver's license, you got to have one, you know, and you come to find out later, you didn't need to do any of that stuff. It was all voluntary.
Right. And that's what it all comes back to me, man, is belief itself, like your foundational belief systems that lead to your thoughts and feelings, that lead to your spoken words, that lead to your actions. Like, that is the foundational thing. And that, I think, like, played or had a huge impact, for example, when it came to COVID. Not only like when it came to the illusion of authority itself, but to the manifestation of disease symptoms. Like, I don't think people really grasp how much their foundational belief systems individually and then also collectively play into the actual physical reality. And that's why I love Veda Austin's work, is because that is a perfect example of that, that water, which we are 99% molecularly, 70%, 2/3 by weight, water permeates all facets of this reality. It permeates all of, biological life. And water is very clearly impacted by thought awareness oriented towards something. And again, what precedes that is someone's belief systems. And just to give an example of how that played into COVID, I brought this up last time we talked, but the second strongest risk factor for death associated with COVID was fear/anxiety related disorders. But there's another piece of that. This book that just came out by this guy named Daniel Reuters, and he's a naturopathic physician out of Australia. And he wrote this book called Can You Catch a Cold?, where he examines the studies throughout history attempting to demonstrate that disease is spread by healthy people coming into contact with sick people or their bodily fluids. I'm getting to a point about belief here.
Well, I can't wait to go into that one.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Yeah,
we'll
but
get there.
I'm just trying to indicate like how much belief plays into things, and people don't realize that, like, more than just on an individual bringing in symptoms, but like on a mass scale, right? So in his book, he examines these two, I guess you could say, meta phenomena: mass psychogenic illness and social contagion. And one example that he gives of mass psychogenic illness is in New Zealand, this drug that was an antidepressant had just gone off patent, so other companies could make their own generic version of that drug. A lot of people who are taking this one specific generic version of this antidepressant started reporting to whatever New Zealand's adverse event reporting system is that they were experiencing side effects related to that drug. There were 27 side effects that were being reported across the board, like 27 common side effects. The mainstream media in New Zealand decided to run a story on this generic drug that was causing side effects, of which, again, emphasized there was 27 common ones. For whatever reason, when New Zealand's mainstream media organizations were running a story on this generic drug, they only named 6 of the 27 symptoms. So they ran a story saying, hey, a lot of people are experiencing negative effects associated with this generic drug. Here are the common symptoms to look for. They only named 6 of those 27. What then followed was adverse events reports skyrocketed only in those 6 symptoms that were named by the mainstream media and not in the other 21 symptoms that were commonly reported before. The reason I bring that up is because I think that this is one of countless examples of how much our belief systems dictate, whether we realize it or not, the outcomes in physical reality. So going back to the illusion of authority, how much our belief in the so-called elites or the parasitic class having this power, of which I have to catch myself on that shit all the time too and not slip into that, oh, like, look at what they're doing, this is ridiculous. And it's like, no, dude, no. Those are just men and women. I mean, maybe reptiles, I don't know what the hell they are in some cases, but point being, they're probably men and women, and I'm continuing to outsource my power to them, thus giving them more power by my foundational belief systems that have a measurable impact on reality itself. And if I'm one individual who's doing that, what happens when we're doing that collectively? What happens instead if we get those same individuals to focus on the power of community, the power of coming together to create something that makes that whole paradigm obsolete and makes it the man behind the curtain in the Wizard of Oz that it actually is. It's all predicated on our belief systems. That's it.
100%. You know, looking at some of the key actors in that class of parasitic individuals that we attribute all of this power and in many cases fear to. Let's take like an Anthony Fauci or a Klaus Schwab. If those guys walked in the room right now and I had no background on what I believe their power to be, they would be like weakling little like cowardly worms that I feel like I could squash with my little toe. Like they're nothing. They're weak. They're like petty tyrants.
Right.
They're total cowards. But when I see them on social media doing this and that, and it's like part of me hates them, but the hate really is a cover for fear. I'm like afraid of the power that they have over me and my life and the way they're going to hurt people that I love and hurt society as a whole, et cetera. But to your point, they literally have no power other than the power that I give them by believing they have the power.
Right.
Right? Like it's like the uniform example I gave you. You know, if it's like when I went in Whole Foods during the pandemic and, you know, if like a customer came up to me and said, you need to be wearing a mask, I'd be like, pfft. But if the manager came over in their little Whole Foods shirt, I mean, I didn't respect them, but I was more afraid of them than I was the customer, Karen, because I want to get my bananas or whatever, you know, there's something there that I want and I believe that they have the power to prevent me from getting it, right? But if you switch those people and just put one in the costume and one not, now I'd be afraid of the other one, even though they're the same person I just wasn't afraid of.
Wild, right?
Yeah, it's like, it's so much of this is like a mind game.
And we all do it. And that's where it's important to have people around you who are of the same mindset, because it goes without saying that it's much easier for multiple people to stand up to some paradigm than it is for just one person to do it by themselves. Like there's examples of during the whole charade of 2020 through 2024 of when the mandates rolled out, people trying to stand up by themselves as one individual within, you know, whoever they were employed by, and failing, because it is much harder for one individual to do that. A lot of them were able to hold people accountable afterwards. Some of them weren't. Some of them are still working through that. But what was incredible was to see when a large group of people stood up authentically together. They had the power to make their workplace be like, oh shit, we can't lose all of them. We literally need these people. So we're going to go ahead and reverse this policy really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to your point earlier of like voting with our dollars, you know, this is a really cool phenomenon to see, you know, like when companies would go woke over the past few years and shit. They
Yeah.
like their shares would tank.
Yeah.
Because people are like, nah, fool, I'm not going to shop at Target or whatever because they're trying to trans my kids and
Right.
all this stuff. You know, I mean, you actually see the real impact of that. I'm just so curious, like how, I mean, other than having conversations like this and hoping that they resonate with a certain number of people, I wonder what the real like needle moving antidote is in our dispelling the hallucination that any single man or woman or group of men or women have any authority over us whatsoever. And I think part of it might be in reviving historical context in the sense that over all of recorded history, the number one cause of unnatural death has been the government.
Right.
Everywhere in the world for all time that we know time existed.
Right.
Nothing has killed more people than the government in one shape or form. And the government is given that power to destroy us solely through our believing they have the right to do so.
Yeah, 100%.
Or our fear of the repercussions if we don't give them that right.
Have you heard of the Free State Project in New Hampshire?
Mm-mm.
Dude, I think the more that things like this can be replicated, and you could say that loosely what's happening by the congregation of large amounts of people in the Austin area who are libertarian minded might be another great example of that, although it's less formal, you could say. But the Free State Project is a project that I don't remember exactly when it started, but it's a formal project. It's literally an organization. I believe they're a 501c3 or 501c4. Anyway, that the intention is to get libertarian or voluntarist, agorist, anarchist-oriented people to move to New Hampshire in mass. And so I interviewed Eric Brakey,
Oh, wow.
the CEO of...
I'm all in, but then I realize it snows there.
Yeah,
Like-
but the more that things like this can be replicated, not that everyone needs to congregate in one area, and that's why, like, shameless plug again for the platform that we're creating is like, I guarantee you will find people around you, and the more that you have 10, 15, 20, 30 people around you, the more that you're going to start feeling more powerful, more emboldened to share that message amongst other people, which is going to have more people come on board. You're passing out Larkin Rose's book and things like this. I don't think many people can argue against his position.
The only thing with Larkin's book is I wish they would redesign the cover.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it's
Not a very good cover.
If the graphic design was just a little more up to date, I feel like it'd be an easier sell. I've shipped that book to people and I tell everyone to read that book. And
Totally agree.
but then I look at it on Amazon. I'm like, oh man, I would have to really trust someone to open this book just based on the kind of
Totally agree with that.
it looks like a 5-year-old patriot drew the cover. No offense to Larkin or whoever
No.
did it, but
Yeah, but the Free State Project thing is an incredible example because what Eric shared with me when I interviewed him for my podcast, he's the CEO of the Free State Project. So the organization, not necessarily like dictating what happens in New Hampshire, but again, charged with getting people to understand, hey, the Free State Project is operating here. Our goal is to get as many people to move to New Hampshire as we can. He shared that during the charade of 2020 through 2024, even though overwhelmingly the New Hampshire government was left-leaning, it didn't freaking matter because the people who were moving to that area that were libertarian oriented, that at the very least wanted minimal government, if not no government, didn't believe in the illusion of authority, didn't acknowledge their power. Didn't matter.
Right.
It did not matter.
Well, that's we don't see the potential of mass noncompliance because it's never demonstrated.
Yeah.
Right? It's like when I moved to Austin in 21, it was much more free than Los Angeles for sure. But if you went to downtown Austin, it was very repressive and weird. And I started to see, you know, the only reason they were able to get away with it is because everyone goes along with it. If, you know, to that kind of like buying, you know, voting with your dollar thing, say at that time, if everyone was of my mindset, your mindset, freedom-oriented, could see through the fallacy of that whole thing, if everyone was like, cool, we're not going to any restaurants or stores, fuck all you guys, which is what I did. I went to Whole Foods a couple times and I was like, nah, I can't do it because I'm going to behave in ways that I don't feel good about. I'm not going to be kind to people because they're asleep and trying to tell me what to do. But if everyone just said, nope, we're done, shut everything down, that's like they'd be open the next day.
Exactly.
That's the thing. It's like the only way these ghouls get away with it is because everyone's like, well, I got to be a good person. Or it's like we have this innate need to be accepted amongst our tribe, right? And it's like, we don't want to be the one black sheep that is bitching about having to put the mask on, so we just comply and go along with it because we don't want to be judged or be called a grandma killer or whatever. And so even people that like in the pandemic, even people that knew better still folded just out of peer pressure.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't enough peers to stand with them. If there were a higher number of peers going, yeah, I'm with you, they would have the courage to stand against it and just ignore all of that shit.
Yeah, which is, again, why I stress the importance of community and finding your like in-person local community, especially because, like, again, at this time, it seems like it's getting a lot better for us. And I think it will continue that way. But I am not confident in the mechanism of government to continue to initiate that change. It's going to require that we come together outside of the mechanism of government and start uniting in community and putting our eggs in that basket to start forming parallel things that make the old structures obsolete. Most healthcare today operates on an outdated mechanistic model, treating the body like a battlefield rather than a self-healing system. You wait months for an appointment only to receive a rush diagnosis that labels you rather than truly understanding your unique health. Even in holistic health, many practitioners rely on endless lab tests and supplement protocols, addressing symptoms instead of the root cause. And the result, another prescription or supplement regimen that merely suppresses or masks symptoms rather than facilitating true healing, whether the imbalance was physical, emotional, energetic, or a mix of all three. And that's why Dr. Tom Cowan co-founded the New Biology Clinic, to offer something radically different. As one of the most respected natural health doctors in the world, Dr. Cowan has spent decades challenging conventional medicine and advancing a deeper understanding of human biology, water, and natural health. His work isn't just about rejecting the mainstream, it's about offering a more truthful, biologically coherent approach for healing. The New Biology Clinic recognizes that health isn't about fighting disease, it's about restoring balance. You're not a diagnosis, you're an individual with a unique story, and healing should honor that. With virtual consultations available worldwide, the clinic offers a flat-rate monthly membership that gives you direct access to practitioners who take the time to actually listen. Members also get exclusive health live streams, a resource library, and live sessions covering everything from Biofield tuning and breathwork to movement and meditation, all designed to support whole body healing. And if you're not ready for a membership, you can book a one-time appointment, sign up for an enrichment-only membership for the healing modalities alone, or schedule a free connection session with one of the care team members to see how the New Biology Clinic can help in your specific situation. This isn't about keeping you dependent on doctors. It's about making you sovereign over your health. Head to newbiologyclinic.com and use code THEWAYFORWARD, and that's spelled The Way, F-O-R-W-A-R-D, for $50 off account activation, or just head to the show notes for more info. If you're a member of The Way Forward, email hello@thewayforward.com for $150 off. Your body already knows how to heal, and New Biology Clinic helps you remember.
One of the pushbacks that I think is common when you start bringing up the radical idea that no group of people has the inherent right to rule over another group through violence, threat, coercion, death, etc., is that, well, I mean, someone has to run things because people aren't trustworthy and humans are dangerous. I mean, we're like these feral animals, so you have to put someone in charge of us when we're in large groups of people. And, I know Larkin's answer to that is like something to the effect of, okay, so you have a group of people and you can't trust them to do the right thing. They're going to hurt each other, exploit each other, violence, etc. So we need to bring in some other people to control those people that can't control themselves. It's like that whole idea is nuts. And
human beings are fundamentally corrupt and immoral, so let's take human beings who are fundamentally corrupt and immoral and give them the exclusive right to issue commands, dictate, give orders, and threaten those or initiate aggression against those who don't comply. Makes a lot of sense.
That is so powerful. Yeah. Just that that awareness. But then, even though I can see that myself, I'm so conditioned still that if, all law enforcement, all military, all government agencies all just evaporated right now, I would still be going, well, who's going to protect me? You know what I mean? It's like, well, now the bad people are going to come in and take over, ignoring the fact that the bad people have already taken over. They just wear a tie, right? They're the mafia. They just, they're not Luigi from Brooklyn. They're a good actor, like a Gavin Newsom, who's a total criminal, total gangster. But just, is it also a really great actor? Or not even very good in his case, but like Obama, like great actor, total criminal, total mafioso, thug.
Yeah. I have thoughts on that. So first I want to say like the overwhelming majority, well, I can't say the overwhelming majority, but from my perspective, a large amount of the people who are in law enforcement in the military, because I was one and I was a well-intentioned person, I think, are well-intentioned people that do actually just want to do good to protect and serve and serve their country in the case of the military, but are being used in ways that are not that. Or when it comes to police officers, are just policy enforcers where they're making sure people they're not tailored towards just making people don't infringe upon each other's rights. It's well beyond that. They're policy enforcers for these nonsensical, nonviolent crimes that have nothing whatsoever to do with like protecting the community. So I don't claim to have all the answers of how it could go, but one way that I have thought about quite a bit, and I know other people who are of the more voluntarist mindset have thought about this as well, is local police agencies don't have any competition nor incentive to perform very well for their job. And again, that's not saying they're skirting their responsibilities. That's not saying that many of them aren't doing well or like really sacrificing themselves day in and day out. That's not what I'm saying. But if you had a system where it was effectively systemless and there was competing private, you could say, security forces that you could hire in your local area that would have an incentive to perform well because they could be competing in an open, free market against other private security forces. And let's say this one had a bad rap because they accidentally killed Joe's dog instead of getting the bad guy that had broken into Joe's house. They would get negative reviews relative to this one. So they have a very strong incentive to perform well because they know that if they don't, people will stop hiring them in an open market. Or maybe I have an arsenal of guns in my house. Or maybe I live in a neighborhood where everyone's doing their trauma, their shadow work, their childhood trauma healing. So they're understanding the necessity to not project their own unhealed shit onto other people. I'm like, you know what? I don't feel the need to pay for this service, but thank you though. I don't actually feel the need to pay for any protection because my community feels very safe. And I also have like 6 guns in my house and I have all the locks and alarm systems. So I don't need that service. So I'm not going to be extorted or coerced to pay for this service because I don't really feel that I need it. But thank you though. Versus someone else who lives in a community where it's like, damn, there's still a lot of people who are like, breaking in, and we had a breaking and entering down the street. Tom had it in his backyard yesterday. I heard some people walking around. I'm going to pay a little bit of money for this service. I'm going to find the security force that has the best track record and pay for that service in the private rather than having to do it through the mechanism of government when they have no incentive to perform well. They have no competition either. That's one way that it could be done.
I mean, the fact that none of these institutions have competition because they've centralized and monopolized every facet of society, it's inherent that they're going to be either corrupt or incompetent, right? Because there's no motivation. I mean, if I was the only podcaster in the world, I'd probably care a lot less about it.
Right.
Yeah, whatever. Just fuck around. Don't really do my notes beforehand. Just wing it. I'm the only guy in town. It's like, why would I have any incentive to do well at what I do? Wow, there's a Joe Rogan out there and there's Alec and these different people. I'm like, dude, I got to keep up. Like, I'm not a competitive person, but in order to stay relevant, in order to keep ears and eyes on my content, I really have to deliver.
Put a lot of intention into it.
Yeah, I've got to deliver. Otherwise, I just fade into irrelevance. And I sense that that's what would happen with a lot of these institutions. I mean, imagine, like, I know you have your kid in a great private school that aligns with your values and whatnot. If that didn't exist, you would be beholden to the public elementary school down the street that gives a fuck all as a whole. Not that certain people there don't care and do their best, but as an institution, it's abjectly terrible.
Right.
You know? And so imagine so we think, oh, who's going to teach our kids? Well, say public school didn't exist at all. It was just totally abolished and everything went private, like the Acton Academy, to your police force kind of analogy there. Imagine how great the schools would be, because everyone would have to outcompete Acton Academy and be even better than that in order to, you know, stay solvent.
And that's a perfect example. And that's funny you say that, because that's the exact example that I bring up all the time on the difference between government funded things versus private funded things. And you see the clear examples across the board in terms of education, even though these educational markers are largely arbitrary and are government based. But the point is that it's pretty obvious that people who go to public schools perform percentage-wise way better than those who go to public schools. The private schools outperform them by every category. And that's a perfect example of what you get when something's private funded and they have to compete against each other versus government funded that doesn't have competition.
Do you ever feel like, I mean, I know we talked about this earlier. I think we share the perspective that we chose to come here as a soul because of the opportunity for growth. Right. And so you need to come into a place that has a bandwidth from very low consciousness to high consciousness potential, so that there's something to work up toward. Otherwise, you would just come in at level 1,000 and what's the point, right? We're already all postgraduate. So we need kindergartners. And so some of us come in and maybe we're kindergartners and we move up the scale of consciousness and awareness of who we are, remembering who we are, why we're here. But sometimes when I look at this shit, I just go, dude, I'm on the wrong planet. Like, get me the fuck out of here. What am I doing here with all these NPCs in this broken ass system? Why are we even having a conversation about the relevance or validity of someone else telling me what to do? Mm-hmm. Like, what are you talking about? You put on a tie and like go on TV and all of a sudden like you're making some codes and statutes, and if I don't follow your arbitrary bullshit codes and statutes, you're going to come and physically assault me and hold me at gunpoint and throw me in a cage? What? You know, I was like, what is happening?
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I'm just like, what am I doing here?
Yeah. And that's where, like, I don't know, we've had so many conversations today, so I don't know if we said this on this podcast or when I interviewed you for mine, but it's recognizing that these are just catalysts for our own development, ultimately, at the end of the day, for our own, whether you want to call it soul growth or the growth of the one mind, as I see it. They're all purposeful. Like, we're supposed to rub up against these, you know, so-called parasitic class, and they're supposed to play that role. And if we recognize what they're doing as an opportunity for our own growth, for our own formulation of ideas and creative pursuits to create things that are better and more aligned with God and more aligned with earth and more aligned with community, it's an incredible opportunity. We just have to see it as that. Like, dude, if it wasn't for 2020 kicking off the way that it did, I wouldn't be sitting here with you having this conversation. I wouldn't have the way forward. I wouldn't be doing any of this stuff. I was an officer in the Army at the time, knew that I wanted to get out of the Army, knew that I needed to get out of the Army, but I was thinking about going to physical therapy school, chiropractic school. This is late 2019. And then when 2020 kicked off, I just felt a spark ignite in me. I saw the opportunity, like, oh, natural health is being made fun of and people are calling it pseudoscience and quackery and things like this. And I witnessed two people I love drastically reverse conditions via adopting what they're calling pseudoscience and quackery. I know that this is ultimately for mandatory pokes for all people. I need to say something. So I started speaking. And then that led to me following the, you know, proverbial bouncing ball down this path of just following my own authenticity. And it was because of the Klaus Schwabs, the Bill Gates, all of these so-called nefarious actors in the parasitic class. So it's being able to recognize that, like, in the illusion of duality, I am playing this role where I push up against them. And I am going to call out what I believe to be things that are evil and immoral and corrupt and inhumane and not in alignment with God, not in alignment with love, not in alignment with community and the earth, while recognizing that they're there to play that role so that I deepen the expression and authenticity of who I am if I just recognize these situations for what they are, an offer, a gift for deepening my own self-exploration and deepening who and what I am and what I'm doing here.
Great catalyst.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing when you are experiencing what you don't want in your life. What else is that going to do but motivate you to find and create what you do want?
Yeah.
You know, if everything was already as we wanted, there wouldn't be any inertia for change. We'd all just be like frolicking in the joy of being human. And, you know, it's probably how it is when you leave your body. That's the sense I get. If you go to what they call heaven, then all this shit goes away and you are just bouncing around living your best life. But we must come here and choose this.
Don't you think that could get like, I won't say boring after some time though, which is why.
Yeah,
like,
probably.
You know what I mean? Like you don't, it's not that it gets boring. I mean, it's like probably total bliss all the time, but it's like, just like we were talking about in the last conversation, the richness of love, of bliss, of joy, like genuine joy, is so much greater when you have experienced pain and suffering and, you know, grief and all of these other things. It makes it so much more rich. The experience is so much more like, I appreciate this more.
Yeah, I mean, without adversity and nothing to push against, I don't know that you could make any progress. So if your goal is to make progress, unfortunately, you need adversity.
Right.
We talked about this a bit on our last episode, but I don't know. I feel like every podcast in the world needs to just be this every single episode because it's so annoying to me. And that is another huge part of my awakening was discovering the fallacy of germ theory, as you alluded to before, that if a healthy person walks in a room and there's a sick person, that the healthy person gets sick because of them. This is just an assumed truth that we just blindly follow our entire life. And when the pandemic happened, it was about 2 weeks, I admit, where I was like washing my hands and kind of like, what's going on? I see these, didn't know then, but like fake videos from China, people just like keeling over on their face in the street and whatnot. But then pretty quickly I was like, something's rotten in Denmark here. Okay, I'm not buying this. And from very early on until this moment now, I truly, I mean, in my bones, in my intuition, any intellect I can summon tells me there was never anything that they're attributing to COVID-19 as a virus that made people sick. What I think they did was create a bunch of phony ass tests, create a bunch of mass hysteria, trauma-based mind control at scale, got people convinced that the cold and the flu that they always experience periodically and seasonally was this other deadly thing, threw those people in hospitals, killed them with various interventions like remdesivir and ventilators and whatnot to create this kind of mass hysteria so that each person could say, oh, someone in my family died of COVID because the hospital killed them, et cetera. I think the whole thing was a complete and utter psyop, which is fine because it's like behind us. But what drives me nuts is that this lab leak theory and long COVID, those two things, anytime I see that, I want to pull my fucking hair out and slap someone back and forth across the face like, dude, and you know, God bless them because I've been duped a lot in my life too, but wake up. There never was a COVID. There never will be. The whole thing was completely fraudulent and manufactured and fake. So you can't have long COVID. There was no lab. There was no leak. You can't make a virus because they've never been proven to actually exist in reality. That's my stance. Tell me why that is right or wrong from your perspective.
I don't think I need to say anything else. That was actually incredible. That was absolutely correct. So in order to make a claim about, let's make it very basic, that X causes Y. That is your claim, right? I think all of us can agree that you would need to directly observe X causing Y. So if you say that virus,
called proof.
Yeah, it's called evidence. And when we're talking about a scientific claim, we're talking about something that has been demonstrated, a hypothesis that has been demonstrated in accordance with the scientific method. So X causing Y, in this case, we're talking about a virus existing and causing illness, right? You need direct evidence of that claim. And when it comes to virology, there is no direct evidence of that claim. I'll refer back to the episode that I did with Luke 2 years ago. And we'll
put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll link. I just did a presentation on this recently. And I'll
Were you going into depth?
Yeah, going to 2.5 hour presentation on this.
The show notes for this one will be lukestorey.com/Alec2, ALEC. So we'll put, I know, because you know, you did the end of COVID series. I mean, you've done hundreds of hours explaining this. For some people listening, they're like, but my grandma had COVID.
Yeah, I'll give some updated perspectives on this.
So just know Alec has like a lot of data behind the perspective that we both share. This isn't just like my intuition. I mean, this is like very legitimate and provable, and there's much more content than we have time for today to that end. So we'll put all that in the show notes. Yeah,
so I just did a 2.5 hour presentation on that, and that's what I'll probably have you guys put in the show notes. But so the things that sort of lend more credence to that idea, a lady by the name of Christine Massey has submitted over 220 Freedom of Information requests to various government health institutions across the world, asking them for evidence of a virus existing inside the fluids of a sick person, which is what they claim, right? That's what they claim. They claim that there's viruses inside the fluids of a sick person that are transmitted via those fluids to another person wherein it causes illness. That's their claim. And again, she's not asking McDonald's and KFC and Walmart for this evidence. She's asking the CDC, the FDA, various health institutions that are the ones making these foundational claims.
And just to be clear, whoever makes the claim has the burden of proof.
Yes. That's a maxim of law. That is a maxim of law.
I think people forget that. Like, I'll talk about the moon landing, like, I think the moon landing is fake. And like, well, you prove it. I go, no, you have to prove that it happened.
Yeah,
There's no evidence to support that. So it's not my responsibility. Exactly. I'm the one refuting. You guys said you did it, and I don't believe you did. So show me you did. Oh, we can't. We lost that technology.
Yeah, or we taped over the recordings of it. Yeah, that one. So, yeah, the burden of proof lies on the individual making the positive claim. That is literally a maxim of law. So, again, when Christine Massey has submitted Freedom of Information requests to over 220 health institutions across the world, every single one of them has said that they do not have that evidence. Every single one of them has come up and said that we do not have evidence that you're looking for. The search of our records has found that there is no evidence pertaining to your request.
Wow.
Okay, so that's one thing.
And that's a pretty straightforward and specific request.
Yes. Oh,
I mean, like, we're not asking for something obtuse here. That is like very detailed.
No, like what she asks for, and I discussed this in my presentation, is essentially all records pertaining to the isolation of a SARS-CoV-2 virus. And she's done this for other viruses too. She's done this for a variety of them, but let's speak specifically to COVID. All records pertaining to the isolation of SARS-CoV-2 directly from the fluids of a sick patient without first combining said fluids with monkey kidney cells. I'm not referring to a culturing of something. I'm referring to the evidence that these particles exist inside the fluids of a sick person where they are claimed to exist. And every single health institution that she has submitted a Freedom of Information request to has said that they do not have the evidence for this request. Now, I was previously involved in a project that I'm no longer a part of that is carrying on or expanding upon the work of Dr. Stefan Lanka. So to give context on Dr. Stefan Lanka and a little bit of context on how virologists claim to isolate viruses, they take snot from a sick person, they assume that snot contains viruses, they add that to viral transport medium. The viral transport medium contains, at a minimum, amphotericin B and gentamicin, which are nephrotoxic antibiotics and antimycotics. Nephrotoxic meaning they're toxic to kidneys specifically. So again, snot from a sick person, assumed to contain virus particles, added to viral transport medium. They then take that combination, add it to typically what are monkey kidney cells inside a dish, and then they reduce the nutrient serum that they deliver to that cells from 10% to 2% to 1% to 0%. So fetal bovine serum is a nutrient serum that they give to cells in cell cultures and biology experiments and things like this. And they're reducing the amount of nutrients that they give to the cells when they introduce the snot from a sick person. So they're starving the cells, you could say. They're also adding more amphotericin B, more gentamicin, which again are nephrotoxic antibiotics, antimycotics that they say are there to keep the environment sterile and free of fungal and bacterial growth, but nonetheless have a nephrotoxic, meaning toxic effect to kidneys, and they're adding these substances to monkey kidney cells or human embryonic kidney cells. Okay. After all those substances are added, and again, the snot is assumed to, but never verified to contain virus particles, just assumed. After all those substances are added, the cells, these monkey kidney cells or human embryonic kidney cells, after all those things have been added to them, break down, experiencing what is called a cytopathic effect, which is cell injury or death. And then they prepare the sample for electron microscopy, point to the resultant particles in these electron micrograph, these black and white images, and say that these particles are viruses. Okay, so that's how they, quote, isolate viruses. Now, Stefan Lanka in 2022, I believe, did the exact same process that virologists follow. And by the way, he's a virologist. That's what he's trained as. He's a virologist himself. Did the exact same process, except he did not include any snot from a sick person, meaning no possible source of viruses were present. The exact same results happened, meaning the results that virologists point to as the foundational evidence for the existence and pathogenicity of viruses, Stefan Lanka completed without any possible source of a virus present, thus falsifying the idea that cytopathic effect in culture is evidence of viruses. Now, that's already crazy in and of itself. He's falsified the foundations of virology. Another group of people has done the exact same thing 90 times. And not only that, but has employed objective verification methods, this thing called Countess Cell Viability Analyzer. And what that is that this machine analyzes the cells in a dish and gives an objective rather than, with your eye analyzing the image like, oh, it appears that this number of cells has experienced cell death. It gives an objective measurement of how many cells have experienced cell injury or death, cytopathic effect, which again, they point to as evidence of viruses. Did the same exact procedure that virologists follow 90 times without any sample of snot from a sick person, meaning no possible source of a virus was present at all. In all 90 out of 90 times, they got the exact same result objectively with this Countess Cell Viability Analyzer that virologists refer to as evidence of viruses. Not only that, some of those samples were sent to another lab, blinded, in which those labs were told, we want you to do transmission electron microscopy on these samples and just look for extracellular vesicles, which is another term for some of these particles that you see on these electron micrograph images. These independent labs did transmission electron microscopy, and in the transmission electron micrograph images, particles that were identical to SARS-CoV-2 were found, particles that were identical to the, quote, measles virus were found, particles that were identical to the, quote, HIV virus were found. But there's a problem because there was no possible source of HIV, of measles, or of SARS-CoV-2 present at all in these samples that were sent because there was no snot from a sick person applied to them at all. So these particles that were the same size, same shape, same morphological appearance as, quote, SARS-CoV-2, quote, measles, and, quote, HIV were found in these electron micrograph images, thus falsifying the idea that these images are evidence of any of these viruses as well. So again, two foundational pieces of virology have now been thoroughly falsified. Oh my God. But what's so crazy, dude, going back to the burden of proof.
That's like case closed.
Case closed. It's
We're
case
done.
closed.
We're done with this conversation.
We're done.
I mean, not us, but
yeah.
Well, we're almost done because you got to go soon.
You're right.
It's like, what is there to refute at that point?
No. But what's crazy though is the burden of proof isn't even on those of us who are like pointing it. The burden of proof was on them to begin with. Like they were the ones who were supposed to come up with the foundational evidence, and clearly what they point to, the cell culture, quote, isolation technique, okay, that's already been falsified. Electron micrograph images, okay, that's already been falsified. So anything built upon that is foundationally pseudoscientific and unproven because the foundations were falsified. So they don't have any evidence of their foundational claims. So this leads me to the next point. I think you want to talk about like, quote, contagion a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Dude, it's so funny because I'm dismantling the belief that people get each other sick, and I'm pretty much done with it.
Yeah.
Based on conversations and information like this. I mean, I think people kind of get each other sick, but for different reasons, which you'll kind of unpack.
For sure.
Like how women have their menstrual cycles at the same time, kind of thing. The signaling and et cetera, Biofield signaling. But still sometimes like Allison will be at home and she'll be like, oh, I think I'm getting a sniffle, don't kiss me. Or I went over here and that person was sick. And I was like, dude, don't worry about it.
Right.
It's like, it's not how it works.
Right.
You know, but I still catch myself.
It's a tough paradigm to break.
Like a guy came to fix my door the other day and he was like kind of sniffly and sneezy. And I was like, whoa, keep your distance. I was like, no, you know, kiss the guy. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's fucking
Make out
fake.
with me, dude.
It's all fake.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a tough paradigm to break. And again, I want to emphasize that I am not at all denying that people experience illness. It's crazy because when I say that there's no evidence of viruses, people will say, are you saying that I didn't get sick? I'm like, no, I'm not saying that people don't get sick, nor am I saying that Johnny, your little son, didn't get sick right after your daughter Sally was sick, or that Johnny went to preschool and he was healthy before he started preschool and then he got sick at preschool. I'm not denying that 2 or more people get sick in the same space with similar symptoms. What I am saying is that there's no evidence that it's caused by a virus, nor is there any evidence, bacteria and fungi are real, they're real things, but nor is there any evidence that disease is passed by healthy people coming into contact with sick people or their bodily fluids. Again, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of people reading the book called Can You Catch a Cold? That book is so incredible because it analyzes all the studies that have been done throughout history attempting to demonstrate this, and every single one of them has failed. They failed to demonstrate this idea that disease is spread by healthy people coming in contact with sick people or their bodily fluids. So what we have to do when we have this observed natural phenomenon of 2 or more people getting sick in the same space is come up with other hypotheses for this phenomenon and test them if we're trying to get to the bottom of it. But we don't even need to do that in order to point to the lack of evidence for one paradigm. And a perfect example of that is if you're saying that Johnny killed Bill and you highlight the fact that Johnny or someone that looks like Johnny left Johnny's apartment complex on CCTV footage, and then CCTV footage at a gas station, this truck pulls up that looks just like Johnny's truck, and this guy gets out that's Johnny's height and shoots Bill and kills him. But there's a problem with that. Johnny, on that same date, was in Bali. He wasn't even in Wisconsin where the murder took place. He has all the plane receipts, all of the restaurant receipts. He even has Instagram live video that he recorded while he was in Bali on that exact date of the murder, thus falsifying the idea that he was the cause of Bill's murder. Do you then say, well, shoot, this is the best fit model that we have. Even though you've thoroughly falsified this, we're just going to stick with you until we can figure out who did cause this? No, that sounds absolutely absurd. No one would go with that.
Well, the way we do it now is like, because we don't know who did it, and you can show me proof that he didn't do it, therefore he did do it because I can't come up with another reason.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what that's exactly what we do.
Yeah.
I can't come up with another way to explain 2 or more people getting sick in the same space. I see what you're saying about virology being falsified, but until you can tell me a better reason.
I'm sticking with the thing that's been proven to not be true.
Exactly.
And like it's your responsibility to say why it is happening, because you're the one that says we've proven that this is not why it's happening.
Exactly.
It goes back to that like hot potato of the burden of proof
Exactly.
thing. It's like when I interviewed Flat Earth Dave, you know, it's like he had a lot of really compelling ideas that I just could not find a way around.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a bunch of other things on that topic. The big rebuttal to that is like, okay, well, what is it then? Right? Like, what is the nature of this realm and, you know, Antarctica and whatever? It's like, I don't know. It's not my problem. I'm just saying what we've been told doesn't add up in its entirety. That doesn't mean that I know what does add up.
Right.
I'm just showing you what doesn't.
Right.
And that's it, you know?
And we can come up with other possible explanations and spitball. And like, that's where I want to be very clear here. And I know Dave and then also Mark Gober, who just wrote the book on cosmology, we're all very good because we kind of have to, because people are like, oh, what is it then? I'm like, look, dude, I'm okay with saying I don't know for sure. Like I don't know for sure. I have other possible explanations for what might be the cause of this or that. And in this case, when it comes to so-called infectious diseases or 2 or more people getting sick in the same space, I have other possible explanations for what might cause that. You can think of, for example, weather changes. when we experience drastic weather changes, whether that's through traveling, like you go to an environment that has, via a flight that has no humidity whatsoever and the temperature is extremely low relative to where you just were, or back and forth, vice versa, or living in Texas when it goes from 80 all the way down to 30 suddenly out of nowhere and then back up to 80 again a few days later, that causes irritations in our mucosal lining and things inside of our bodies and constrictions of our blood vessels that absolutely can have the effect of initiating a detox or vice versa. In addition to that, when you talk about seasonal changes, when we're getting less sunlight, we're spending more time indoors, even if we live a more holistic lifestyle, we're immersed in a field of, overlapping fields of non-native EMFs. We're getting less sunlight, which is essential for the fourth phase water that our bodies are likely comprised of. We're not spending as much time outside. We're not sweating as much. We know seasonal depression is a thing. A unique combination of both of those things, and then take into account when I'm living in community with you, and we're talking, there might be environmental things that they're spraying outside in the skies, or maybe some farm down the road just started using this experimental pesticide or herbicide, as has been showed in various other so-called viral illnesses, like with polio, the spraying of DDT, or the water was just poisoned recently near us, or you and I are living in the same house or same apartment complex, and there's a Wi-Fi tower right next to us, or we're with someone who's using toxic cleaning products all the time, or we're both exposed to the same physical and metaphysical toxins, right, in our environment, and a combination of that with seasonal changes or weather changes. And then you also have the same eating habits, the same emotional trauma that you might be suppressing. Or if I, as a dad, am in a perpetual state of stress, I see the effects in my kids. We see it happen, which is an incredible mirror and an incredible reason for it's like, damn, if I'm not doing the inner work to come into emotional regulation myself, it impacts my kids, because being in that field of stress perpetually has an impact on people. So it's a unique combination of all those things. And then the other thing I like to bring in as context, given that we're water-based beings, and given what Veda is indicating with her various experiments that she's done, and given that we likely have a biofield, I mean, even the National Institute of Health recognized that, not that that means that it's true, but we have what many ancient spiritual traditions would call our aura, or the biofield, which is anything that has an electrical current produces a magnetic field. We have a subtle electrical current growing through our bodies. We have an electromagnetic field that surrounds our bodies. And given that we know these devices right here, computers that anyone who's watching this or watching on, or your phone, or you're listening, we know that these devices communicate via overlapping fields, frequencies, and signals. And we know that man is who created these devices in our own image, you could say. Is it possible that our bodies also have this same technology innate to them in a far more advanced way? And is it possible that if we're in community with each other and I've reached a certain threshold of toxicity because I'm spending less time outside, I'm indoors more, I'm in a perpetual state of stress more, I'm eating a little bit differently than I have, and I'm in this shared environment with you, and our fields are constantly overlapping with each other, and my body says, you know what, it's time for me to detox right now. That it might brilliantly communicate to your body. And let's say you've been, despite how cold it is, spending a lot more time outside, and you're like, you know what, dude, I've been a strong, coherent field. Your stress has not been bothering me at all, despite me being your roommate. Your body doesn't detox because it doesn't need it. But our other roommate, Mark, or whoever, he's really impacted by my stress. In fact, he's been stressed out too. Oh, also, not only has he been stressed out, he hates going outside when it's cold, so he just doesn't go outside. He just stays inside the whole time. And he's not really mindful of his light environment. He's just bombarded with artificial lights. He's getting shitty sleep. Okay, my body's detoxing. Damn, his body's reached a threshold too. It might be time to detoxify. So his body does. I'm not saying that that is for sure what happens, but that's also another possible explanation for this phenomenon. And so it could be a unique combination of all those things. And the other thing, like I said with that example from Daniel Reutz's book with mass psychogenic illness and social contagion, we know that this phenomenon is well documented. And also the biology belief, Craig Braden, Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, some of these other people have clearly demonstrated that one's own belief about something can actually manifest physical symptoms related to that belief. So you combine all those factors and apply it to one unique individual. And there are countless other explanations for what causes this phenomenon of two or more people getting sick in the same space. And there are probably so many other things that I'm not thinking of. I mean, one last thing that's pretty interesting. There's this lady named Sabrina Wallace. I don't know if you've looked into her work.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
The Internet of Things lady?
Yep.
Oh, God.
Yep.
Dude,
Yeah.
that's terrifying. Like, I'll start to watch her shit, and I'm just like, I can't. If 5% of this is true, like, I'm freaking out.
Yeah. But what's amazing about Sabrina is that she does share that, like, the more you cultivate heart coherence and the more you step out of here and just be aware that this is what is probably going on. And for those who are unfamiliar, it's essentially that via smart devices and smart like wearable technology, and then also just innate to some of our devices that we all carry around, they're interacting with our biofield and possibly triggering symptoms and possibly even using our biofield as a device for storage and mining of data, which is wild to think about. Yeah. And there's a lot more to that, and I probably butchered the explanation.
Like how nanotech in our environment is turning us all into like walking Wi-Fi routers.
Yeah,
cell
essentially.
Towers, basically.
And what she says, and I could be wrong on this, but from my understanding, what she says is it's not even necessary for us to have the nanotech inside of us. That only helps boost our inherent signal. It's that we, with our own biofield as it is, are already enough for us to interact with these various devices. But again, developing heart coherence, recognizing that largely the parasitic class operates on tacit agreements and setting a hard boundary of no, prayer and intention, coming into heart coherence, spending more time in nature, becoming a clear vessel, negates the effects that any of that shit could have. But the point is, that's another element too. And there are so many other explanations for this phenomenon of two or more people getting sick in the same space. And it doesn't have to be this particle that is causing it. And ultimately, if you look at it like, if there is anything happening that is passed from one person to other, so to speak, is that it's a brilliant communicative mechanism to help our bodies to come back into coherence. You look back at Veda Austin's work with the eggs. She's demonstrated this. She's also done another experiment where she takes spring water, sets it next to tap water, and then freezes the tap water. And typically the tap water has no coherence in the structure. When it's just in proximity to the spring water, it has now become more coherent. So the more that we focus...
It's like the analemma wand.
Yeah, like I love the analemma wand. Yeah, big fan.
Shit is wild.
It's wild.
I know you got to go because you're a dad. One thing on this, to wrap this up, that has occurred to me, like I mentioned, women cycles getting synced up, right? And if you think about us living in smaller tribes and traveling together, it would make sense that women in a tribal scenario would menstruate at the same time, right?
Yep.
According to moon cycles, et cetera. The other one that really trips me out in this regard is yawning. Like if I yawn, you'll start getting tired.
Yep.
And I've not really looked into it, but it makes sense to me just on at face value that, again, going back, hunter-gatherer days, anthropologically speaking, we're in a group of 50, 60 people, and we got the fire lit at night, we've eaten our food, and it's kind of time for everyone to go to bed because nature says, wow, you need rest, right? And so one person yawns, the other person, next thing, everyone's going to bed. Right. It's like that unified field kind of thing of one energetically one living organism that just appears to be many, but they're all constituents of a whole, kind of like the cells in our body, or they make up the body, but each one in and of itself is not the body, right? But coming together, so they all work in synergy and harmony or in discord. And I think to all the things that you mentioned, those are all things that bring us out of coherence into discord. And so we see that as getting sick from each other, but it's just like we're yawning, saying it's time to detox. Or like, wow, my body's feeling a threat from all these toxins from the outside, and you might not know that you are, but that yawn, so to speak, is getting spread to you as someone I live with, because your body goes like, oh shit, we're getting the bat signal here. We got to shut everything down, start sweating, go into a fever, yada, yada, symptom. Yeah. When the underlying cause is really probably will remain unknown.
Yeah.
But the signaling makes sense if you think about just how closely
Totally.
we're wired.
I think the underlying cause overwhelmingly is modernity. Like,
Yeah.
because even when I did my 15-day water fast, like spending more time in nature, I was in Colorado for the overwhelming majority of it, putting my bare feet on the earth, sitting outside every day, immersed in a naturescape that is just mountains that are all around me, not many people, no non-native EMFs. And being out there also made it much easier to process a lot of emotions that were coming up too. So I think they work synchronistically. When you're spending more time amongst God's fingerprints, if you want to call it that, that creates harmonious fields that detoxifies your body, cleanses your body, but also makes it so that it's easier to cleanse these emotions that come up too, which I think the overwhelming majority of, quote, disease symptoms, especially chronic ones, have an underlying emotional piece to them. So I think that modernity itself, in a variety of ways, is putting us in a state of discord.
Yeah.
And we can mitigate the effects of that by returning to nature more and more.
100%. I think every physical disease humans experience could be just called under one umbrella disease, indoorism.
Yeah.
Period.
Dude, it is.
That's it. Like almost everything could be solved by just getting out in the sun, getting hot, getting cold, touching the earth, the pheromones, terpenes, smelling the things in nature, seeing animals, hearing bird calls.
Microbial diversity.
Yeah, hearing the brooks, right?
Yeah.
Eating some food that has some microbes on it because you picked it off a tree or the ground.
Yeah.
We're so divorced from the ecosystem.
Yeah.
I really think everything is down to that.
Yeah, totally agree.
Ultimately,
Yeah.
And still, I spend way too much time inside.
We spent like
spend a bunch of time. At least we could, like with our lights now, thanks to Matt again. Shout out to Matt of Soundshed. We can tune our lights to like a warmer color, which is nice. He put the new lights in, and I turned them super warm, and then I realized all my videos I look as orange as this jacket, so I had to split the difference. But it is.
I do like the feng shui in here too, though, dude. Like it's a good vibe. It's a good vibe.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining me today. I know you got to get to your kids, so we'll wrap it up. But what a beautiful day. It's been so expansive and healing on so many levels for me, and I've been excited to just share your perspective with the audience again. So thanks again.